everybody. Hi, girlfriends. It's Krista Leavitt Curl Specialist. To you a very special guest. She's going to be requesting to join in just a few minutes. Hey, Caroline. There's going to be, curl friends, curly girls, curly guys joining this video, as well as hairstylists and who are looking for information about hair loss, hair thinning, hair and scalp care, and I am super excited. Hello from New York. Hey, I think that we're going to have a lot of viewers today. If you Hi, good morning. I'm doing well. How are you? Good question. Yeah, we're having a little feedback. Okay. I'm going to move myself back a little bit.
Okay, me too.
All right. And if anybody has any text suggestions for us, please let us know. All right. Yeah, we can, if we mute ourselves, then we won't have our video for Instagram. So, all right. This was my plan, but maybe just turn the volume down a little on our devices. There we go.
I'll just turn it down a bit. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think that's better.
Okay.
Let us know, people, if you're having issues with the sound. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Hey, Caroline. Hi, Curl Goddess. So yeah, we're just coming live. I have been wanting to interview. Now I said Caroline, but maybe it's Carolyn.
Carolyn, but Caroline is
Caroline. Okay.
But
so I've been wanting to introduce Caroline for, interview, I guess, for probably a good 2 years now. I found her during the pandemic. Don't ask me how, just the Instagram algorithm. And I just found that it was a really interesting topic. There was obviously talk of hair loss from different product companies on the market. And I was just really curious as a stylist how this kind of plays into what we do every day behind the chair. And so I just wanted to very quickly kind of introduce my guest here. So this is Caroline Ruggiero.
Ruggiero. That was pretty close.
That
was pretty close. Yeah.
So she owns Truly You Hair and Scalp Clinic in the Greater Toronto area. I think it's more Mississauga, isn't it?
Yeah, we're in East Mississauga, so we just border Etobicoke. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So, and Caroline's a trichologist and has been practicing in her field for over 12 years now. And she is really one of the first practicing trichologists in Canada. So, you've got a wealth of information, and I'm really excited to ask you a lot of questions that I have kind of pulled from my clientele and then just from my own curiosity. But if you want to take a minute to explain how you got started and what your business focuses on right now and where you're going with your business, because it seems to have expanded from when you began, like all businesses do. So tell us a little bit about your business.
Yeah, so Truly You Hair and Scalp Clinic is actually now nearing 30 years, to be honest. It is a family business. My mother-in-law started this business quite a few years ago, and specifically to help cancer patients, actually, to provide wigs for cancer patients, and we call it our comfort program, but to help cancer patients before, during, and after their treatments. And so when she started this business, she started it really with a passion to help women. And when I came into the business, really not having a specific interest in hair, I mean, I was working in a very different field. I went to school for very different things. And I thought, I'll help you with the business side of things and maybe marketing and promotion and sales. But when I started, I realized, I was really interested in understanding what was causing hair loss in men as well, but women, really, being a female, obviously myself, and being passionate about what causes hair loss and scalp disorders. I really wanted to dig deeper. So I went back to school for nutrition. And while I was in school for nutrition, I learned that there was this field of study dedicated to hair and scalp disorders called trichology. And so I left, and then I went to study trichology sometime later. And ever since then, I mean, we haven't looked back. The business right now focuses on prevention. So preventing hair loss, preventing scalp disorders, and correction. So correction meaning hair replacement. And we specialize in a very specific type of hair replacement called the CNC, which is a biomedical polymer that replaces skin, and hair is injected into that polymer. So for people that can't seek treatment, medical or trichological, we will offer that option for them. And so now we're sort of a full service clinic. And I like to tell people, if you have any problem with your hair, with your scalp, we have the solution for you.
That's awesome. I think that covers like the whole gamut of anyone that is, you know, challenged with, you know, the hair loss and the thinning, and again, after medical treatments and diagnoses, that you can help them. It's really about feeling confident, because the hair is such a big part of who we are. And if you're having issues with your hair and scalp, it really affects your confidence. So you guys are confidence boosters, you know.
We like to think so. I mean, our tagline is "Be truly you again," and we really want people to feel like themselves again. We hear that a lot, that people are, you know, compare themselves to what they used to have or what their hair was like, and they don't feel like themselves anymore. So we hope that we can give them back a little bit of that confidence and a little bit more of that feeling of, you know, yourself.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I wanted to ask you as well, because probably within the last year, I've seen you post about training for hairstylists, or you were maybe marketing more to like the beauty kind of industry. Can you tell us a little bit about that training? Because I'm really curious about that as well.
Yeah, so we have a course that I teach called the Hair Practitioner Certificate course, or the HPCC course. And this course is actually was created by the International Association of Trichologists. So that's where I was certified. And I was really adamant about teaching a course that was affiliated with an established association. We live in a world of a lot of self-proclaimed experts. And if I wanted to make a quick buck, frankly, I would, you know, create my own course, take Caroline's trichology course, and, you know, you'll know everything. And I have the knowledge and the experience to do that. But I'm really, again, adamant about lifting up these associations that are established, that are offer university level courses. So they've created this condensed version of the full trichology program. And the course itself is 2 days. There's a third day also where I provide some business training, and we cover, you know, everything that you would learn in a full trichology certification, but it's condensed. So it's designed for hairstylists, for dermatologists, for people that are interested in maybe the field, but not sure if they want to pursue it. So we've had our last one now, I want to say just a few weeks ago, and we don't have the date established for the next one. I don't believe we just were talking about it yesterday, but I think it's going to be sometime at the end of the summer, early fall. Awesome. So it's all on our website. There's a tab called Academy, and we certainly have all of those dates and information on that page. Great.
And what is your website, just for people that are following? I'll post details as well below afterwards, but.
Yeah, it's trulyyou.ca. So TRULYYOU. And I always like to sort of spell it out because people forget the second Y. Yes. But it's trulyyou.ca.
Awesome. Okay, that's great. Well, thank you so much for kind of like the history of your business, where you're headed, the hairstylist training. I think that people will find that information really interesting. And again, I'm sure there's hairstylists that will watch this and go, oh, wait a minute, you know, I'm curious about this too. So I have a huge list of questions. So we're going to go straight into questions because I know everyone is following. Oh, awesome. Thank you. Someone put the, someone following, put your website.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So let's get into questions. So these are questions for me. Curiosity killed the cat, you know, as a hairstylist. There's some big parts in the curly world when it comes to cleansing our hair, co-washing versus shampooing. And I kind of want to get into that with you as a trichologist, because you can see the effects of these things over time on someone's scalp. And so I really want to talk co-washing, and co-washing can be explained. Some people refer to it as washing their scalp with a regular conditioner. So they don't use a co-wash product that has surfactants, which would be like cleansing agents in it. They just use conditioner to wash their scalp with their fingertips. Or co-washing can also be like a product that has been formulated and it's labeled co-wash, and it may or may not have the surfactant in it. So there's kind of a lot of variables in the market. And I would say the consumer doesn't really quite know, unless they're educated about ingredients, what exactly they are buying, but they're buying something that has no bubbles, that's more creamy, and they're just going to use it to cleanse their scalp. So kind of, I guess, what would be your take from what you see daily in your work? And what is your opinion on this co-washing that was kind of, it's part of the Curly Girl method. So those of you following, probably everyone knows the Curly Girl method, and co-washing is a big part of it. But what's your take on it when it comes to being an expert out of the scalp and the follicle?
This is such a great question. And, I was so excited to speak to you today because there's so much misinformation just generally when it comes to hair and scalp health. But I gave a presentation yesterday at one of the local hair schools, actually, and I repeated this sentence a few times, and I'm going to say it today, and I'll probably say it a few times, but the sentence is this, and it's simple as this: the scalp is an extension of the skin of the face. The scalp is an extension of the skin on the face. And by that, what I'm trying to get across is that the same methodologies apply. And in the same way that, let's talk about skin types for a minute. So if you have naturally oily skin, you're going through puberty, you're stressed, or maybe genetically you have oily skin, would you wash your face with a cream or a finishing sort of serum? And would you wait 3 days to wash your face with a cream or a serum? Probably not. And I'm not going to ask the audience like I do when I give a presentation live. What are your thoughts? Because everybody in the room says, no way. Well, why not? Isn't that good for you? Doesn't that provide more moisture and give you a beautiful luminous glow? Usually not. What happens is the oil on the face oxidizes, you'll break out. It's gonna be a disaster. So how we wash our scalps really depends on our scalp type. So just like we have a skin type, we have a scalp type. And if your scalp is naturally more oily, I'm going to say stay so far away from co-washing. It's not a good idea. If your scalp is sort of a combination, I want to say, that's not really a term that we use in trichology, but I've just sort of, again, applied that skin to scalp concept. But if you have this combination sort of scalp, then in that case, maybe you can go a little bit longer between washes, but even then you want to be using an ingredient or ingredients that clarify the skin properly. Remember that your scalp is like soil. And when that soil is healthy, when it's cleansed with the correct ingredients, the crop, the tissue that's growing out of this soil will be healthy as well. So I'm not a fan of co-washing. I agree that curly hair, textured hair needs more moisture. Absolutely. Especially in our climate, right? Like this time of year, it's so dry. But applying something that is heavy with moisturizers, even if it doesn't have SLS or SLES, is just not advised.
Yeah, that's great answer. Yeah. A lot of people might argue that the friction of your fingertips on the scalp, and that's kind of what earlier on in training the Curly Girl method, it really doesn't matter what you wash your scalp with, because some people don't even use conditioner; they wash their scalps with water. It can be as extreme as there's a Facebook group where people wash their scalp with urine. It's out there. It's really out there.
I haven't seen that one. No. I haven't seen that one.
So, wow. But it's happening out there. And so a lot of people argue that it doesn't matter what you use. It's the friction of your fingertips on the scalp that would be, doing that deep kind of cleansing motion. What is your thought with the addition of really good cleansing with fingertips?
Yeah, friction is definitely a good idea. I mean, we know that massaging the scalp improves vasodilation, microcirculation. So we're getting more of that, nutrition into the hair bulb, oxygen. So massaging is always great. Friction is good. In some cases, I'll even advise people buy those massaging brushes if they really can't get into their hair. But, again, it goes down to the skin. So would you wash your face vigorously with water water, is that going to cleanse that oil off better than using something that's designed for that skin type? Probably not. In fact, maybe it'll irritate the skin even more. And the bottom line is, outside of the, I mean, I've already said, the scalp is an extension of the skin on the face, but sebum oil is a waxy acidic ester. Okay. So that's important to understand. Why do we produce sebum? We produce sebum because it's antimicrobial. It keeps the pH of the skin low and it fights off microbes, right? So when you're overproducing sebum and now you're using water and you're massaging it vigorously, I'm going to say this irritating, you know, acidic waxy ester, you may risk even pushing it in further and irritating your scalp even more. It's important to help draw that oil out of the skin if you're overproducing it, and regulate that hydrolipidic film so that there's a nice balance between oil and water on the scalp.
Right. So really the bottom line is we need to use cleansers that have surfactants in them to cleanse the scalp and pull away the dirt, oil, debris, environmental debris that might be on our hair and scalp. It's really important to make sure you've got a cleanser that contains surfactants, and it can be more like non-sulfate, because in the curly world, often we do not use sulfates, we don't use silicones or in our hair products. So a non-sulfate type shampoo that lathers, whether it's the gentle lather or a more clarifying lather, what is your thoughts on that? Do you feel like it needs to be more towards the clarifying end of a cleanser, or can these low poos or gentle lather cleansers do a good enough job cleansing the hair and scalp, or the scalp specifically? Because I want to focus more on scalp.
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's no, one answer for that, because I think it starts with identifying what's your scalp type. Okay, so let's talk about that. If you have a very oily scalp, that means you need ingredients that are going to address that oil. So high poo, low poo, I don't know, but in terms of that scalp type, I know I'm going to use ingredients like azelaic acid, for instance. Okay, so we use salicylic acid for the skin. We have ingredients like azelaic acid in topical products to control and balance oil levels. And somebody that has, maybe not as an oily of a scalp or drier scalp, maybe they can use different ingredients on their skin as well. So it really starts with understanding that what you're using on your hair length is one type of product. And what I'll say for people that have, tight curls or textured hair, that first cleanse, focus on your scalp, really get that product into your scalp. And maybe you have 2 or 3 different shampoos. We have 2 or 3 different skincare products, right? Some of us have 15. I mean, I may be one of those people, to be honest, but so you're going to start with massaging that product for your scalp type into your scalp, right? Maybe once, maybe twice, but once should suffice. Wash that out. And maybe the second or third wash is going to be with a product that has ingredients for your hair type, okay? And you're going to massage that, and you're not going to focus so much on your scalp, but you're going to focus on the hair length, and you're going to sort of cleanse the hair length with that secondary product. And then, of course, you're going to use your conditioner and your leave-in when you come out of the shower and whatnot. But really understanding that this skin is separate is key. And what people are going to, women have come to me for hair loss issues, and I've looked at their scalps and they've been co-washing or using ingredients that weren't for their scalp types. And we fixed their scalp problem, and their hair just started to grow like, I want to make a Chia Pet reference for those of you that remember Chia Pets, but, it just started to grow like crazy. And we hadn't done anything stimulating. We just created a healthier environment for the hair to grow in. And that's so important.
That's amazing. This is great information. I love your take on it. It's kind of the way that I've been directing clients over the last few years, and, to do 1 to 2 shampoos. And again, kind of assess what kind of shampoo you need based on your scalp, the condition of your scalp. So, speaking of kind of, we talked about silicones. What is your take on silicones in hair care products when it comes to getting that hair care product that contains silicone near the scalp? Is that an issue for scalp in the
Yeah, silicones, you know, silicones have been used in drugstore products for a long time. I mean, I'm not going to say any names, but there are certainly products out there that have gained, you know, popularity because frankly, they're just heavy with silicones, right? So that first or second wash, the hair looks shiny, the curls are really defined. This product's amazing, but you find by the 6th or 7th wash, the hair is looking dull, limp, heavy, weighed down. So that's a heavy silicone product. And in general, no, I mean, there's so many wonderful ingredients and moisturizers that we derive from nature that are that provide that moisture and restructure the hair. So again, it's, you know, silicones are coaters. We're coating. It's not about coating. We have to start with, I'm going to go even deeper, what's happening internally, which I don't know how much we'll touch on that today, but what's going on inside of the body first and foremost. Okay. And then what's happening with the skin is the second thing. So what's happening with that hydrolipidic film? Is the scalp balance? Is it too oily, too dry? What's going on? And the last is, what are we using for our hair length? And so now for our hair length, is our hair over processed? Is it damaged? Is it broken? A lot of people think that they have breakage, but when we look at their scalp under the micro camera, we see that it's new hair growth, but maybe that hair is not growing fast enough. It could be related to the scalp or something internal. So going back to the, you know, silicone, you know, usually there's a problem with the structure of the hair. So using ingredients that actually restructure the hair, that help the hair length in terms of maybe broken bonds in the hair, and then addressing, you know, the scalp environment, that's really what's going to create healthier hair. But silicones, you know, not great for the scalp, not great for the hair. I'd stay away from that. Yeah.
Okay, good. Those are my thoughts too, or what I was thinking.
Yeah.
What causes blockage of follicles that kind of leads to hair loss? Is it really, like you say, we kind of referred to, like it could be oils getting pushed down into the scalp if we're not using proper cleansers, hair products built up on the scalp? Like, are those really the main things that can kind of start to lead to hair loss if it's topical? Like,
so yes, blockage is a problem and can exist or happen as a result of a scalp that is not properly clarified, as well as ingredients and products. But it's difficult for me to say if blockage can cause hair loss. That's tricky because I think hair loss is first of all, very complicated, and hair loss usually happens for other reasons. We'd like to say, oh, it's the product that I'm using that's caused my hair loss. It's when we dig deeper and investigate, it's usually not the case. The problem has to do with either a deficiency, a real recent illness, hereditary predisposition, hormones, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm hesitant to say that blockage on the scalp causes hair loss. When hair is firmly rooted, an anagen hair that is firmly rooted, it can't fall out because of a topical that you're using. I mean, that's highly unlikely.
Awesome. Okay, that's good. That kind of answers some questions there. When people have scalp issues like seborrheic dermatitis or a dandruff, are those shampoos like the Nizoral, Nioxin, Neutrogena T gels, the things you can get at the drugstore, are they harmful to the scalp or hair? Are there gentler products that we can be using? Because often as a hairstylist, you know, the first line of defense, if I notice something happening with someone's scalp, I'll kind of say, hey, you know, this is what I notice. I'm not going to diagnose because I can't, you know, but I am noticing that, you know, these issues are happening on the scalp. What you definitely want to check in with a dermatologist. In the meantime, you could try, you know, a Nizoral or a Neutrogena T gel or something like that and see if it clears. But I know that there's a huge correlation, and I love that you have studied nutrition as well, because I love studying nutrition too, and I feel like there's definitely a correlation between the health of our body and these issues that happen on our scalp and our skin. So.
Yeah, so this is so many great questions. So the word dandruff means flaking. Okay, so dandruff can occur with psoriasis, dandruff can occur with seborrheic dermatitis, dandruff can occur with lots of different scalp disorders. So that is sort of like the layman term for all of these scalp disorders. So first of all, we need to identify what the scalp disorder is, because psoriasis is very different from, oh, hi, my cousin from Switzerland. So we need to identify what's happening with the scalp disorder. So let's talk about like seborrheic dermatitis, for instance, which is the more common scalp disorder. We see it in teenagers. We see it in people of reproductive age. So what happens here is there's an overproduction of oil. It causes an irritation in the scalp. It's pretty easy to correct seborrheic dermatitis. You can use T-gel, Head and Shoulders for a couple of weeks. It'll probably be gone. But let's say you're dealing with something like seborrheic eczema or psoriasis. So we'll start with seborrheic eczema. This is an allergy in the skin. So this is not as easy to fix as seborrheic dermatitis. It's much more itchy. And, people will scratch sort of even sometimes subconsciously at night to the point where they're bleeding. So we have to identify what's causing this irritation, what's causing this reaction in the skin. And typically people that have eczema on other parts of the body can also be prone to eczema on their scalp. It's also treatable, but not with something like Head and Shoulders or T-gel. Generally, you may need something a little stronger. Last but not least, psoriasis. So psoriasis is an autoimmune scalp disorder. This is a complicated scalp disorder because it can be triggered by lots of things. Sometimes stress definitely gets in the winter, worse in the winter time. But what happens with psoriasis is now skin cells overproduce too quickly and they don't shed. And you start to develop this sort of white plaque. And you see this dandruff and flaking. You're buying Head and Shoulders. You're going to the doctor. The doctor's not looking at your scalp. He's recommending something else. And you don't seem to get any real relief. Maybe in the summer, it's a little bit better. And I'll tell you why, because I think I like to leave little nuggets of information. But vitamin D deficiency and autoimmune scalp disorders are closely correlated. And we know that vitamin D exposure can really help with a condition like psoriasis. It won't help with eczema or seborrheic dermatitis, but psoriasis, it can help. So identifying what the scalp issue is first is really important in identifying what treatment is going to work best. And I think, one of the beauties of that, even that condensed course that I teach, which I recommend for everybody, is that it'll help you identify the difference. Because if you know now, and you don't have to be a trichologist to have a micro camera in your salon or in your center and look at that scalp and go, what are the main clinical features? I'm not a doctor, I'm not diagnosing, but this looks like seborrheic dermatitis. It looks a little bit less complex. You could try this product that I have for, an uncomplicated dandruff or something drugstore. But if you look a little bit deeper and you see, oh, I learned about this clinical features, this looks like something more complicated, that person needs to see a trichologist, I would say, a dermatologist as well. But we can talk about the difference between a dermatologist and trichologist. You tell me when, because I can go on and on and on and on.
Sure, yeah.
But I think the key message is identify what the scalp problem is before you can recommend a solution.
Yeah. That's awesome. I know I do see a lot of issues with mostly teens of people who wash their hair at night and go to bed with it wet up in a towel overnight. And, the odd time, it's not a big deal. But if it's every time you wash your hair that you're sleeping with it wet, plopped on your head, I see a lot of hair loss happening and almost like fungus basically growing on the scalp.
You're absolutely right. So, this is funny that we bring this up because my daughter, out of all people, her mother's a trichologist, but she's notorious for doing this. She's almost 13 and she washes, she has a busy, active life and she washes her hair before she goes to sleep. And she doesn't want to blow dry it. She likes to sleep with it wet and it drives me insane. And, where does yeast thrive? Okay, we know it's dark, moist places, right? So what happens when we go to sleep? If we're already prone to producing a dandruff, if we are oily, that is just going to sort of grow and get worse overnight. In the very least, blow dry your scalp. You don't have to sit there. Maybe your hair is drier. I mean, my hair, as you can see, is bleached. Unfortunately, I have to do these things because I'm pretty gray, but, I process my hair heavily. So I know that I need to, maybe not over dry the ends, but I will dry my scalp before I go to sleep. That's important for sure.
Yeah. I feel like that's, again, I've seen, bald patches of hair loss from people who consistently do, wash at night, go to sleep, and like a really bad smell coming from that area too. Like it's that yeast growing on the scalp.
It's a yeast. Yeah, Malassezia globosa. So it's a yeast and it grows and it'll proliferate if it's not addressed and properly. So you're just creating a breeding ground.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know like moms are busy. So oftentimes they don't get to shower till late at night. And it's like, it's been, you know, a week and a half since they got their hair washed and they just really need to wash it. And again, every once in a while, I don't think it's detrimental, but if it's consistently, that's all you do, then, you know, and, you know, for any curly people that are watching, that's definitely something that you need to change in your routine. Like you say, at least dry the scalp, you know, and squeeze as much water as you can into the ends, but your scalp really needs to be dry.
Yes.
So yeah. Okay, I think I'm almost to the end. I think you've hit on every answer of question that I had. There's one last question that I had. There's a lot of products on the market designed, you know, for putting oil on the scalp and massaging, whether that oil is left on overnight or it's done before you get in the shower. But they often have ingredients like rosemary and castor oil, and often it's to help with scalp issues that you may be having, but also maybe to help with hair growth. What is your take? Are oils good for the scalp? And also, I guess we could talk about hair, but what is your take on oils in the scalp?
Yeah. So in general, I've known about hair oiling, scalp oiling for a long time. In many cultures, it's been practiced for, you know, thousands of years. And in Ayurveda, it's very popular. So, you know, massaging, oiling the scalp, I'm not against it per se. However, I can tell you, because I used myself as sort of a guinea pig, I'll tell you that much. And I used a scalp oil and I used two different techniques because I am oily. I'm also had a history of having seborrheic dermatitis and seborrheic eczema when I was younger. So I thought, okay, with my scalp type, I wonder if this will work. And I, in my gut knew the answer, but I wanted to try it anyway. And initially, when I started to oil and leave the oil overnight, the first week, my hair really looked good, actually, really healthy. My scalp felt good, but it only took a couple of weeks before I started to develop a dandruff again. So, and I'm not saying that my scenario is going to be the same across the board, but what I knew in my gut and I proved to myself is really scalp oiling depends on, again, the scalp type. So if you have a more oily scalp and you want to use that oil on the scalp and massage it well, I would say wash it out thoroughly before going to sleep. Do not leave it overnight. And don't do it consistently. I mean, not every night, maybe a couple times a week. Start off slowly, wash it out if you're oily. That's the main message. Massaging is great. We've talked about this already, but vasodilation is wonderful for the scalp, expanding those capillaries and sort of activating that hair growth cycle. There is, some research about rosemary. I don't want to touch on the study too much. I don't think it's exceptional, but I know that there are people that use rosemary oil and have been very successful with that method. But as a trichologist, I know that hair loss, again, it's complicated. The reason why people lose their hair is there's thousands of different reasons. So theoretically speaking, you could have a reactional hair loss. Maybe you were deficient in something or you were ill and you recovered from that. Now you're using castor oil on your scalp and it's regrowing your hair, or so you think. And now you've formulated or created a video for castor oil and hair regrowth, and people start using castor oil. Everybody with a hair loss issue starts using castor oil. So something that's worked for one person is not necessarily going to work for you. You don't know it's going to work for you until you've had a scalp analysis. And so with hair oiling, I think it can work for somebody. Some people, I have no problem with it, but really think about what your scalp type is when you think about the frequency of the oiling and how long you're keeping that oil in your scalp.
Yeah. Do you think that you could achieve the same, I think you called it vasodilation, so the same, like bringing blood flow to your follicles and your scalp? Can you achieve the same thing without oil, or is the benefit to using oil that you can move your fingers through, over the scalp easier then? Like, is there a benefit to using oil versus just
and I see that question too. That's a good question. So, you know, there are some wonderful scalp preparatory shampoos. We call them pre-shampoos and scalp scrubs. So I prefer that people that are prone to an oily scalp, or people that are prone to oily dandruff, or even a dry dandruff, use a preparatory shampoo, which has more of a gel-like consistency. And sometimes it contains ingredients like diamond particles, to be honest. So natural sort of keratolytic effects, or alpha hydroxy acids. And those are much more effective at, you know, you can still manipulate the scalp a little bit better. It's easier than doing it with dry hair, and definitely better than using the oil for a scalp issue like that. So there are more and more products like this on the market. And I guarantee you in the next 5 years, you may see more of these pre-steps than the actual shampoos, because we're starting to understand that scalp types matter. They mean something when it comes to hair growth.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. I think that was it for kind of my main questions as a hairstylist. And I want to get into questions kind of from the audience, which are my clients who I surveyed before this live today. And we'll just go through the questions. Some things we may have already covered, so I'll just skip it.
Yeah.
But the first question is, do you have any recommendations or best practices to combat hair loss? Do you have any suggestions for people?
Yeah. Okay. So
there's like external, but also there's internal too, right?
Yeah. So I like to call it, you know, I say the holy trinity of hair loss, but there's 3 things that we need to look at. One, internally, what's happening. Okay. So what's happening inside of your body? When's the last time you had blood work done? When's the last time you saw your family doctor? If it's been never, or for most people, it's been 2 or 3 years, because the COVID just sort of erased 2 years of our life, right? Yeah. It's time to get some blood work done. So once you have that blood work, now we have to analyze that blood work and see if it's within a range for the hair. Because something important to note is that there's ranges for the body, but there's also ranges for the hair. So you may be within a good range for the body, but just a little bit low or short of what the hair needs. Because again, the hair is a non-essential tissue. We like hair, we want hair, but we really don't need it. So it takes usually from the body what's left over after the body's absorbed what it needs. So that's internal. So find out what's happening inside of the body. Topically, 2, what are you doing topically for your hair type, but more importantly for your scalp type again? Are you using the right combination of ingredients? Are you addressing this oily scalp or this dry scalp or this dandruff? And are you using the right products for your ends? And the last element, last but not least, is do you have somebody professional that's helping you identify these issues and guiding you through the process? Because we're so, you know, we live in a world of information, right, at our fingertips, and it's very tempting to self-diagnose and have Dr. Google tell us what's wrong with us. But you need that professional guidance. So whether that's, you know, seeing somebody like yourself or somebody like me, really having somebody look at your hair, look at your scalp, and say, this is what we need to do. This is the plan. These are the steps. Because I guarantee you what's going to happen is you're going to spend years trying 500 different products, wasting time, wasting money, and back to where you started, not really having an answer. We need to identify, and I tell this to, you know, patients and clients all the time. My number 1 goal is to educate. You know, if people come walk through my doors and don't spend a penny, but leave understanding what's happening with them, I'm happy. I've done my job. And that's really my only goal.
Yeah, I love it. That's the same. Education is so important. You know, I just feel like, you know, knowledge is power. So you can kind of make educated decisions for yourself if you know the facts. But if you don't know the facts, you're just kind of floundering. So like you say, Dr. Google. A lot of people have gone down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this kind of is the same question, but what causes hair loss? So we talk about, you know, it can be hormonal, you know, so we can talk about, you know, menopause, pregnancy, any time that our hormones shift and change and dip. And then also nutritionally, are we deficient in vitamin D, vitamin B12? You know, can you expand on that?
Sure. So, and I'll explain this part in sort of the same way that I would explain it in consultation. So in a consultation, the first thing we talk about is genetics. because genes obviously play a role, and that role is different for men and women. For men, hair loss is a dominant trait, meaning that it's really easy for men to inherit hair loss. If a man, a baby boy is born into the world and he has one person on one side of the family that has patterned hair loss, he has like at least a 50% chance of having that issue. So with women, it's a recessive trait, meaning it's difficult for us to inherit patterned hair loss, meaning that epigenetic factors actually play a really big role in hair loss, and hormonal issues and deficiencies play a significant role as well. So establishing first and foremost what those genes are and how strong of a genetic predisposition we have, or how weak a genetic predisposition we have, is important, because let's face it, if you have good genes, right? If everybody in the family has fantastic hair, you can be deficient in A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z, and not be sleeping well and have 12 children, and you've got a lot of hair. And it's frustrating because, you know, we're looking at this person going, oh my gosh, why does she have so much hair? Look how bad she's eating and she's so stressed. Why is this happening to me? And it may go back to that foundation. So establishing that foundation is first. The second thing is, and we'll focus on maybe female hair loss a little bit, is identifying now throughout your lifetime what else has happened that has triggered this problem. So we can start with hormones, hormonal changes that happen in puberty. Young girls that start to see thinning hair, specifically in the frontal area and the crown, as early as puberty. And I see girls this young, 12, 13, 14 years old. We know it can be because of either hormonal imbalance like PCOS or PCOD, or it could be, you know, hereditary predisposition that has manifested itself early on. And we know that because if the hair loss happens here and here, where we have androgen receptors, hence the term androgenetic alopecia, it's usually because that girl has become sensitive to those receptors. Later on in life, the next hormonal milestone for some women is having children. And of course, we know, and I like to touch on this because a lot of women don't know this, is in pregnancy, the reason why the hair becomes so wonderful in pregnancy is because of hormones. It's not those prenatal vitamins. So yes. What happens is estrogen levels like skyrocket, progesterone, all these wonderful female hormones, and these help to now grow and stimulate hair growth. So after the pregnancy, what happens? We deliver the baby, or we have a C-section. And at that point, something very specific happens that triggers hair loss 3 months later. And that something specific is the placenta is delivered, or the placenta is taken from the body. And guess what? The placenta contains a lot of estrogen. So when that placenta leaves the body, it's actually close to, I think, 130,000 milligrams of estrogen. When that placenta leaves the body 3 months later, postpartum hair loss, and sometimes even postpartum depression, right? Yeah. So this drop in female hormone levels causes that hair loss issue. And the last hormonal hurrah is, of course, menopause. And we actually begin to prepare for menopause earlier than we think. We may not see changes in menstrual cycles, but we start to see changes in our hair, because hair is the fastest growing tissue on the body. So what are those changes in hair that we see? We see changes in hair growth cycles. So the hair is not getting as long as quickly. It's not feeling as shiny. Maybe it's starting to thin in this area where we have more androgen receptors. And sometimes we see hair growth in areas where we didn't see it before. Right. Thank you, androgen. So what happens is, as female hormones sort of go down, Margaret, damn menopause, I know. Yeah. So what happens is female hormones start to dissipate. We become more sensitive to male androgens. We don't produce more male hormones, right? We don't become more masculine, really, but we become more sensitive to these male androgens. And male androgens affect hair growth cycles at the frontal area and the crown here. So hormonally, those things are pretty inevitable for most women, and genetics are, we can't really fix. So here's the important message I want to get across in terms of what causes hair loss and what we can do to treat hair loss. And I don't know how many of your viewers have heard of epigenetics, but epigenetics is a really interesting science and growth. It's growing quite a bit. And there's a lot of research going into all of those external and sometimes internal factors that can affect our bodies. So diet, nutrition, sleep, stress, all of these other things we know have a huge effect on our hair and our bodies. And if we focus on those epigenetic factors, we can actually influence our genes over time. And again, I'm not going to mention any companies, but or brands, but there was a company that did a study that actually compared cyclical vitamin therapy to the use of traditional topicals for hair loss like Rogaine, and they found that cyclical vitamin therapy over time worked better at treating genetic hair loss than DHT blockers or topical stimulants like minoxidil. So what that tells us is we can't overlook our lifestyle. We can't overlook how we're sleeping, how we're eating, and those things can play an important role. So even women that come to me that have a strong genetic predisposition that we really can't fix, that have gone through these various hormonal milestones, I always tell them, listen, as long as there's hair, there's hope. If there's hair growing on your head, we can make it thicker. We can make it stronger. We can prevent it from worsening by focusing on these epigenetic factors.
I think that that's really, you know, to touch on that, I think it's really interesting. I follow somebody on Instagram. His name is Anthony Williams. He's a medical medium. And a lot of his books, again, it's kind of out there, but again, not to overlook what we put in our bodies and how that, you know, either, you know, improves our health or, you know, declines our health. But he talks a lot about, you know, over the years, this midlife hair loss can also come from an overload of like toxins in our body, heavy metal, you know, buildup and things like that. So I think, again, not to kind of put that out of the mind that yes, you can do topical things and you can work with it just like you're doing, but also to incorporate that holistic, you know, health for our body, you know, your sleep, your exercise, and the food that you put, you know, whether you're juicing, smoothies, green veggies, you know, all those good things for us. But I think that plays a huge role because a lot of us get tired in midlife and we have, you know, aging parents and, you know, teenagers, and we're exhausted. And so I find for me, I just start eating what the teenagers eat, and it's definitely not working well for me. So, but anyway, so that's great. That kind of like covers the gamut of, you know, what causes hair loss and what you can do to kind of, you know, change things. And obviously, if you're somebody who has access to visit Caroline at her clinic, you know, obviously, you know your stuff. You are an educated woman, and I love it because I love kind of delving into this science of hair. Because really, in the cosmetology textbook 20 years ago, you know, there's maybe a chapter on hair loss and scalp issues, but we're not trained any further than just to observe and maybe notify the client. But I think modern hair care is evolving, and hairstylists are evolving in terms of how we want, you know, we want more education so that we can help our clients, you know, we just want their happiness and their success. And I think educating yourself as a stylist in hair loss and being able to refer when it's warranted is a huge benefit to the customer in your chair. So
yeah, I mean, education and information, you know, is growing, and we have, like I said, because we have this access to information, I think it's our duty as professionals to, you know, sort of educate our clients, our patients, and tell them, listen, there's value in taking that, the time that I've spent, the schooling that I've done, the conferences that I've been to around the world for years. I mean, I've spent all this time and money because I don't want to just be this fly-by-night person that pushes products. I really want to educate and help people understand that no, not everybody can be an expert. I mean, we really have to work together and say, listen, you want the right information, you have to go to a reliable source, and that's how you're going to get the right guidance. Otherwise, you're just going to be, you know, this rat, mouse running around in a wheel and more frustrated and stressed and probably, you know, experiencing more hair loss because of the stress at the end of the day. So I think it's so important for us to stick together and you know, get that message across and make it clear.
Yeah, that's great. No, I'm with you 100%. Partnering with a, you know, hair professional, whether, you know, I think that's the key. And I think a lot of people, again, try to Dr. Google, you know, YouTube it. And I think there's times where you just need to say, I need to go see a professional. So
get the answer. Then, I mean, at the end of the day, what you choose to do in terms of solutions will be up to you. You know, you can,
that's right.
You have products at home. Maybe you bought something online. I'm never going to sit here and say, you need to buy things from me only, but, you know, or take my protocol, take my advice. I want you to understand what's causing your problem. Yeah. And that way you can make the educated decision. Do you want to take the medical route, the paramedical route, the holistic route? You know, that'll be up to you, but at least you understand what's happening. If you don't understand what's happening, how can you begin to attempt to solve it? I mean, it's, you know, it's, I'm seeing some questions pop up. I don't know if you see them too. So maybe.
I do too. Yeah. A question about the hair loss. Someone mentioned, you mentioned hair loss here and hair loss here. What about hair loss at the temples?
Oh,
you know,
that's a good one. Yeah.
You know, these areas at the temple, you know, some people.
Oh, you have such a great hairline. Oh my God. So the hair loss at the temples. So in general, the hair recedes as we age, right? Men, women, our hairline recedes. But if there is an increase in hair loss, specifically at the temples, I will tell you more often than not, it's affiliated with telogen effluvium. So reactional hair loss, so hair loss because of being sick, because of, you know, going through high periods of stress, the hair falls everywhere, but we do notice more of thinning in these areas. So very different from, again, like we said, androgenetic alopecia or female pattern, male pattern hair loss exists more at the frontal area and the crown. So when I notice that people are losing more hair here, and there have been actually 4 different patterns that have been established that aren't really advertised in the hair world, but from what I recall, it's the half moon, the triangle pattern, the band pattern, and there's one more that I can't remember. And these specific patterns that happen at the frontal hairline have been associated with this reactional hair loss. And it's important to understand that, because I see a lot of before and after pictures that show only the temple area. And my first question when I see those before and afters is that telogen effluvium? Meaning, is that a temporary self-corrective hair loss that would have, you know, regrown anyway, but that person happened to use product, you know, X, and it regrew a little faster maybe? So, you know, I always question that. And you'll see even on my Instagram page, I have before and after pictures of the temple area. Not all of them are telogen effluvium, but many of them are. And I think that, you know, it's important to understand that where you're losing the hair, it can help identify what's caused that kind of hair loss. But there are patterns of female hair loss that will just recede here. So what I would look at in that case is in that genetic sort of lineage, what is the pattern of hair loss in your mother's side or father's side? Is it just the temple area? Is it just receding here? Because that's possible as well. But more often than not, it can be TE.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. What is your take on normal hair loss? You know, what we've been told as stylists is 50 to 100 hairs per day is normal hair loss. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's about right. You know, what happens is, and because we have all these wonderful curly haired girls and maybe boys as well listening, with curly hair, the hair, obviously, as you're walking throughout the day doing your thing, it doesn't fall as naturally or as easily as somebody with fine straight hair. So what women will, you know, often say is that I see a lot of hair loss in the shower. And the reason for that is, as you've said, approximately 50 to 100 hairs a day is pretty average. So if you're losing about 50 hairs a day, if now you haven't washed your hair for 3 days and you've got curly or textured hair, you're going to see a lot more hair loss in the shower or in your brush versus somebody that has straight hair. Yeah. So yes, 50 hairs to 100 hairs is about average, but don't be alarmed if you have curly hair when you're washing it. You're seeing a lot of hair because you haven't lost the 50 hairs a day plus the 300 that you have in the shower that day.
Yeah,
it's probably just accumulated over time.
And when should someone be concerned about hair loss?
So, you know, generally speaking, I say go with your gut. You know, there are women that, first of all, they feel like it's vanity, right? There's so many worse problems in the world. You know, women have these, people have these life-threatening conditions and disorders. It's just hair loss. I'm going to ignore it. Maybe it's normal. Don't ignore it. You know, when you're seeing a little bit more hair loss in the shower, you know, when your scalp feels more irritated or uncomfortable. So really listen to your gut and reach out to a specialist, reach out to a professional and find out, because those first early signs could be a sign of a more complicated scalp disorder, a more complicated hair loss disorder, or, you know, worst case scenario, it's nothing, but at least you've gotten the education on how to take care of your scalp and your hair. And that's wonderful too. So it's a win-win. Don't delay. In general, I'm seeing more and more complicated hair loss disorders and scalp disorders in recent years, I'll be honest. So don't wait. I know it takes a few months, 3, 4, 5 months, sometimes to see a dermatologist, but reach out to your trichologist or reach out to somebody that's maybe taking the HPZC course and get your answers as soon as possible.
Do you think that blood work is the first step, that somebody should reach out to dermatologist or trichologist, but while they're waiting, get their blood work done? Is that something that can speed up the process?
It gives us some information. I mean, there is a list of blood work that I like to see that's a little bit more specific. So now we do ask patients to come in and bring blood work in with them. So we'll look at the blood work they've done and we'll say, okay, you've done this and this and this, maybe this is missing. Let's get you another rec. But you can certainly get blood work done, because, you know, if you walk into my office and your ferritin is 10, you know, that's one more thing that we can start treating immediately without waiting for that doctor's appointment.
Yeah. Speaking of ferritin, is it true that your ferritin number has to be up over 70 for you to see the hair loss stopping and hair growth starting? Is that inaccurate? I've seen that or heard that.
Yeah, so that's pretty close. 40 is stable. Okay. 70 to 90 is improved, meaning 70 to 90 is a good range for most people. I would say above 90 if there is a thyroid issue or another more complicated imbalance. So 70 to 90 is ideal.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm just noticing the time. How are we for time? Do you have a few more minutes for questions?
I have a few more minutes. I believe I have somebody that I'm seeing soon, but I have a few more minutes. They're not banging on my door yet.
Okay. Okay. Somebody had a question about, there's so many different types of products with collagen and biotin in them that boast results. Which form or type of collagen or biotin can our body actually absorb and use, so it doesn't just become really pricey pee, which that's so funny.
That's funny. So collagen and biotin. So collagen and biotin are great for the body, great for the skin. We know this. If you have joint pain, absolutely collagen can be very helpful. There isn't very good research that it helps with hair, I'll be honest. So I don't, you know, disagree with maybe people that have had a positive experience with their hair taking collagen or biotin. I'm not going to argue that. I question whether or not they were doing something else that was right at the same time. But any products with collagen and biotin in them that you're using topically, I think it's a little bit of a gimmick. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I don't mean to be, you know, I'm going to get a bunch of emails from companies that now collagen and biotin in their products, but I think that's something that should be taken orally. You know, if you're going to take collagen, if you're, you know, non-vegetarian, if you're taking a bovine, you know, or a grass-fed collagen liquid tends to be a bit better. I know that bone, broth is quite popular right now, a good source, very absorbable. So there are, different types of collagen that are certainly better, but orally always, I don't think it does very much topically. I would really spend the time focusing on what you're deficient in and what you're using for your skin type before we started to use products with collagen and biotin in it to help to restructure the hair length. Yeah.
Is there something specific you can do if it seems your hair loss is related to hormonal changes? So
the word seems, I question that because what does that mean? Seems. Again, is that Dr. Google? Did you do a hormonal test showing maybe that you have?
I think they're referring to like birth control or postpartum. That was in brackets.
Okay. So okay. Yeah. So postpartum hair loss is a telogen effluvium. So it's self-corrective, meaning that usually starts 3 months later, and 3 months after that, the hair growth cycle should regulate. The hair should go back to normal. What is your normal? That depends. What's your genetic predisposition? Are you deficient in anything? How quickly will you recover from postpartum hair loss? Depends on those other factors. Birth control. Modern birth controls typically don't have hair loss as a side effect. I'll say that. There are some older birth control types that can cause hair loss, but they're not usually prescribed. But again, so birth control sometimes is prescribed for hair loss, actually. And the reason for that is female hormone levels, right? Once those are stabilized, it can help hair. Coming off of birth control, changing birth controls can cause hair loss. Okay. Got it. So anything that we're taking orally or even, an IUD or switching out an IUD can cause fluctuations in hormones and can cause temporary hair loss. There are some groups of people that will claim that taking birth control over time consistently can also cause hair loss and thinning, but I don't know if I agree with that completely. It's more changing birth controls, stopping birth control, starting birth control. Any sort of sudden changes in hormones in the body can cause changes in hair growth cycles. Yes.
That makes sense. If someone is experiencing hair increased shedding or hair loss due to medical issues or stress, this is a great question. Is it better to avoid washing your hair as often, or is it better to stimulate the scalp by cleansing it more frequently?
So medical hair loss, which kind of medical hair loss?
Either stress or medical issues. If there is someone, if someone is experiencing hair loss in general, is it better to avoid washing their scalp, or is it better to wash it more often because you'd be stimulating the follicles?
I always opt for washing more often than not. If you're going through hair loss as a result of, and I said medical because sometimes, we didn't talk about chemotherapy and hair loss, but there's a concern about washing and overstimulating and creating, and the hair and scalp may be more sensitive during certain medical treatments, but washing the scalp often, if you have a scalp type that needs to be washed often, is important, regardless of what you're going through medically. Certain medications can dry out the scalp. So here's another thing that can happen, right? Your oil production levels can drop. We talked a lot about overproductive oil or overproductive sebaceous glands, but we haven't really talked about low oil, right? Low oil is also a problem because when you have low oil, you can also create a breeding ground for yeast because you don't have this waxy ester that's acidic that'll fight off microbes. So low oil can also create a dandruff. So, and medications can do that. So, but in general, whether it's low oil or high oil, if you're going through medical issues, you should keep washing your scalp, keep washing your hair. Maybe you need to be a little bit more gentle because your skin's more sensitive, but don't sort of stay away from washing.
Right. Yeah. Because any kind of stimulation is good.
Yeah, for sure. It is. Yeah. Absolutely.
How are you doing? Are you still good?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe 2 more minutes. Let me just, because we're live here, but it's okay. I'm going to just hop onto my schedule. I was pretty sure that I had an 11, but let me just see if they are checked in yet. And maybe they're watching this too. Who knows? No, look at this. See, and this is why we check. It looked like there was, no, they've been postponed to come in a little bit later. So I'm good.
Perfect. Okay. We should be able to get a few more questions. This is a really hot topic. And that's why I was so excited that you were willing to speak with me, because I just felt like to educate the general public is all these questions are going out there, and to have them all in one place, I think is going to be super helpful, and people can refer to this. I'm hoping to make a YouTube video from this if my computer cooperated.
We'll see.
And then people can watch it after. So somebody had a really great question about what is the difference between dandruff and just a dry scalp? And I think you kind of addressed that earlier, but
I can say it again.
Really is dry scalp.
Dandruff is flakes. So flakes can happen for different reasons. So those flakes can happen because of scalp issue like psoriasis, like seborrheic dermatitis, or like seborrheic eczema. So identifying why the flakes are happening is important. So this is it. So the word dandruff to me just means flaking. Okay. Why does the flaking happen? I don't know. I haven't seen you. Some people think they have, just dry dandruff. Oh, I have dry dandruff. They come in, we do a scrape test, we see specific clinical features, and we identify that it's psoriasis. So it's important to know why that flaking is happening.
I think a lot of people tend to get like a drier scalp just in the winter. They get a little bit more dry flaking areas in winter. So I see that a lot, and they're curious if they have dandruff. But if it just seems to happen in the winter, just a dry scalp, it's probably just the dry environment. Who knows? It could be more, but.
And you may need to change the products and ingredients that you're using throughout the year, right? In Canada, we have 4 seasons. So we're going to have in Toronto, especially a hot and humid summer, and a really dry winter. Well, dry, people in Alberta will argue if it's dry, but we consider it a dry winter. So you may need to use different ingredients. Maybe in the winter, you need to use a topical or a pre-shampoo or a scrub that has a keratolytic effect that's going to get rid of dead skin cells, just like for our bodies. In the winter, maybe we're using scrubs for our bodies to get rid of that dead skin, and we're using heavier moisturizers. So the scalp is the same, and that's okay. That's okay. You don't have to be religious to one routine. You may need to adjust that routine a little bit as we go through different seasons.
Yeah. Would you, because I know a lot of people complain of an itchy scalp. So to me, an itchy scalp sometimes means you might have a sensitivity to an ingredient that's in a product that you're using. So I might suggest to somebody to change up the products in a routine, or, one at a time, set the product aside for several washes to see if that might be helpful. But do you have any suggestions for if someone has an itchy scalp and dandruff is not an issue? There's no flaking, it's just their scalp itches.
Okay, so the question that I would ask myself if your scalp is itchy is, one, is it itchy right after you come out of the shower immediately? Like you're out of the shower, it's itchy. Or is it getting itchy as you're going throughout your day or days after the wash? Because that'll help you sort of identify what's causing the itchiness. So if it's itchy immediately afterwards, this could be a more complicated scalp disorder. Okay, so this could be something like psoriasis. This could be that your scalp is actually dry. This could be something autoimmune in the scalp. It's important to see a trichologist at this stage for sure. If your scalp feels great after you've washed it and continues to feel pretty good throughout that day, I like to say, listen to your scalp. Okay, it's telling you something. If it's becoming angry as you go through the second or third day, it usually means that now you're producing that oil and it's over accumulating as you go on through your day. So as that waxy, again, acidic ester keeps over accumulating and your hair and scalp gets progressively itchier, it's probably time to wash. So when you feel the itchiness is a little bit of insight into what kind of scalp issue you have and how to treat it. But again, of course, I would say, see somebody to identify what's going on.
Right. Okay. That's really great. Does psoriasis ever cause hair loss?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you have psoriasis, depending on the type of psoriasis and depending on how long it's been there and how thick the plaque is, what happens is now these dead skin cells over accumulate and they sort of layer on top of the hair. So hair growth cycles continue underneath, but dead hair doesn't shed because that plaque keeps it down. So what's going to happen is when the plaque is removed, or whether that's through washing or using something keratolytic, you're going to see a lot of shedding. So it's a dysbiosis, a disorder of the scalp of any kind can create hair loss issues. It's a sign that the scalp is not healthy. And I don't love using that word, because if you have psoriasis, you're healthy. It's not your fault that you have psoriasis. It's autoimmune. But it's a disorder in the scalp, and that disorder needs to be addressed, because if it's not, it can cause shedding and hair loss issues for sure.
Okay, that makes sense. I think this is the last question for me, and then there might be a couple questions from the viewers here. Why is one side of the head a lot thinner than the other after experiencing hair loss? So the density didn't return on one side of their head.
Yeah, that's interesting. So in general, I will tell you, first of all, when it comes to hair growth on the head, it's not 100% evenly distributed. So we're not completely symmetrical, as we know, and hair growth is the same. So sometimes, for instance, when people are thinning in general, they'll notice, oh, the left side of my scalp is thinner than the right, and it's thinning faster. I don't have a scientific answer for that, I'll be honest, as to why that happens. And I would say that when the regrowth happens, it may be for similar reasons. I mean, there could be other things that I'm thinking of. So traction on one side. How is the hair, styled? Is it just on one? Are you sleeping on one side all the time and rubbing? Right. I mean, these things are possible, but in general, it's, that's hard to prove unless I do a trichogram. So I would do is I would run a software and measure the hair density on one side of the head and the other side, and we would track that over time as that regrowth happens. Mm-hmm. If you have regrowth from a sudden or temporary hair loss situation, give it time, right? Give it time. The hair growth should come back more or less evenly. It just takes time. But there isn't really a scientific reason outside of the fact that things aren't really symmetrical when it comes to our bodies, our faces, and our hair.
Yeah, true. I have one client that consistently brings her hair to one side, whether, that's just how she likes to wear her hair, maybe a comforting or nervous thing, but her hair density on the right side of her head, the one that's being touched and moved a lot, is maybe a quarter to a third as dense as the other side of her head. So to put her hair back in front like this, there's barely any hair on the side, and this side is very full. So even I don't know if you call it traction, but just that constant touching and moving, it's causing more breakage. And so she's just constantly pulling to one side. But that's a really, we talk about, you can experience hair loss or damage from even pulling a bun too tight. Your hairline can recede, like ballerinas,
Of course. Traction alopecia is not uncommon with different styling techniques. There's a lot of, I can address this too, because a lot of the time when they'll come in saying, I don't wear my hair back anymore. Okay, how did you wear your hair back? Oh, I put a clip in it, or I wear a low ponytail. And I'm thinking that's not enough to cause this hair loss problem. Traction alopecia really has to happen when you tightly pull your hair up. It has, like you said, a ballerina, if you're using styling techniques or putting in braids or hair systems that really pull on the hair every single day. And sometimes people will come into my office saying, I think I have traction alopecia. Okay, let's see. So we look at the scalp under a dermoscope, under a trichoscope, and we can see what the follicles are doing at 200 magnification. And we can confirm that. And that's helpful for them too, because, maybe they feel very disheartened and guilt. There's a lot of guilt that we feel with our hair. I see that a lot too, right? People will say, I shouldn't have colored my hair, or I shouldn't have worn it in this style for so many years. Release that guilt. It's nothing you did. Most of the time it was out of your control. And styling is very much the same. It's really only those tight styling techniques that cause traction alopecia. So don't worry about wearing your hair back in a loose ponytail or a clip.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense. There's a great question from Caroline about weight loss and the hair loss connection. So for example, I have someone I know who just had a gastric sleeve done, or, you know, kind of gastric bypass. She's going to lose 100 pounds within this year. And usually that quick, speedy weight loss comes hair loss at the same time. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. So what happens, and even though this was a decision that she made, I'm sure, you know, for her health and appearance and all kinds of reasons, but your hair doesn't see this sudden reduction in calories or caloric intake as a positive. It thinks that there's, you know, a pandemic in the world, and there's, you know, suddenly a huge shortage in food, and it focuses now on survival. So the body kind of goes into fight or flight mode, and it's absorbing nutrients. It's not really growing hair properly. So you start, the hair growth cycles change and you shed hair, and this is all very, very, very typical with a sudden weight loss. But it is a telogen effluvium, so it is a temporary self-corrective hair loss, and that's the key, right? To know that while you're transitioning and into this new body, that you're following your doctor's recommendations, you're supplementing, you're doing everything properly so that you're not nutritionally deficient, and then slowly the hair will recover. So stay on top of, you know, your blood work and your levels, and make sure you're doing the right things topically, right? A lot of the time when women lose hair suddenly, they get terrified and they stop washing their hair, right? And I see this a lot with rapid weight loss as well, where people will stop washing their hair because they're afraid to see how much hair has fallen. And that's the worst thing you can do. You want to keep washing your scalp, washing your hair, take your vitamins, do everything that you need to do, and the hair will come back,
Awesome. Another question from Caroline Michelle was, what ferritin and vitamin D levels do you recommend for hair growth?
So vitamin D should be above 99. That's ideal. So you'll see on your blood work that the range is, I think, 75 to about 125 or 225. With ferritin, 40 is stable. So if you have no other deficiencies in the body, if you're healthy, if there's no other issues happening, I would say 40 is stable. 70 to 90 is improved. So 70 to 90 is optimal.
Got it. When do I refer someone to a trichologist versus a dermatologist? So this is a hairstylist asking. Is there, that's a great question. How does a hairstylist know who to refer to?
Yeah, and I'm going to say this, but not to suggest that a trichologist is the better option. But given the circumstance, so I'm just going to, you know, speak to the Canadian healthcare system a little bit. Okay. So what happens in Canada is if you want to see a dermatologist, you need a referral. Okay. Right. To get a referral, you have to go to your family doctor. That process can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And that's a long time. So I would always say, see a trichologist first, not because they're better or smarter, but because they'll give you answers and guidance. So for instance, by seeing a trichologist, and a trichologist will do a full hair and scalp analysis, the trichologist will be able to identify, is this a complicated matter? And do you need to see a dermatologist, right? Even though I'm not diagnosing, I can identify based on certain clinical features if this is a more complicated issue that requires a biopsy. So, or is this female pattern hair loss, male pattern hair loss, temporary self-corrective hair loss? And these are all hair loss disorders that a dermatologist, frankly, can't help you with, okay? So if you're going to see a trichologist first, not only are they going to help educate you and guide you, but if you do need to see a dermatologist, you can come in there, and I use this word a lot here when I explain, you know, why you need to see a trichologist first, but you can go in there with ammunition. So you can go in there with information, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take pictures. I'm going to magnify those pictures 200 times. And I'm going to tell that person, okay, when you see the dermatologist, hopefully they'll look at your scalp. Okay, hopefully, we're crossing our fingers. But if they don't, this is what you're going to show them. You're going to show them this picture of your scalp magnified 200 times. And I've circled the areas that show irregular spacing or parafollicular inflammation or signs maybe of early scarring. And that magnified image is going to prove to them that, yes, you need a biopsy. Okay. This is not just genetic. This is not just aging. This is something more complicated, or this is ringworm, God forbid, or something else. But for ringworm, we can get medication from our family doctors. We don't need a dermatologist. So by seeing a trichologist first, you'll get the information, the guidance, the ammunition, so that when you get to the dermatologist, you're already going to be prepared. You're going to be in there knowledgeable with sort of a list of instructions for them. So that's awesome. It just will speed up your whole treatment process.
That's a great way to look at it. I love that question because that's a good one. I think there's maybe one last question because the other one I think we covered. So another stylist, Caroline, I have a client with waxy buildup. I need my glasses. And she's using a clarifying shampoo. So what could be, and there was another question about if you've got, recently last 8 to months, you're going through kind of this, menopause, you're in menopause and you have really oily roots. Is there anything that you can do? So maybe this answer from you might address both, or they might be two separate issues.
So waxy buildup, what is the waxy buildup? Is it oil? If it's oil, then is a clarifying shampoo going to help the scalp? Yeah, for sure. Washing the scalp more often is a good idea. Any salon stylist can do a little mini scalp treatment, in your salon. There are some great products and ingredients out there that I'm going to say even probably the suppliers that you work with right now have that are wonderful for the scalp. So introducing or incorporating a mini scalp treatment in with your salon service is a good idea. So, it's difficult for me to say, how to treat a waxy buildup, because what is that waxy buildup? Is the clarifying shampoo going to be enough? Is it something else? More often than not, I can say that waxy buildup to me means that there is an overproduction of oil, and maybe there is a heavy product that's been used possibly for curly hair that is heavy in moisturizers and conditioners that is sort of bound with that oil and created this waxy buildup. But in the same way that if we had a waxy buildup on our faces, we would need to do a deep clean, maybe a mask, maybe we need to see a medical esthetician to clarify that waxy buildup and clarify the skin.
I know often like hard water can leave a waxy, heavier feeling in the first couple inches of scalp, maybe just because your hair products like your shampoo can't work as effectively when you have really hard water in your home. And so that's kind of often I'm recommending somebody do a shampoo that will remove hard water minerals or a treatment to see if that might solve that issue that they're having.
Yeah, so I mean, very hard water, but also really soft water can actually do more damage. So people have water softeners in their house, and maybe they're great for the skin on the body. And remember, the skin on the body is different from the skin on our face and on our scalps, and even on our chests and on our backs. We have these active sebaceous glands here to fight off, again, microbes, but on the body, we don't. So it may feel good for the skin on the body, but not so great in cleansing the scalp. So there are some water filters that you can apply directly to your shower head. There are filters that you can put right into your house. And sometimes we can't really control that too much because of where we live or whatnot. So even more of a reason to identify what ingredients and products should I be using on my scalp, given the kind of water that I have to use. So water type can definitely affect how well the hair is cleansed and how the hair and scalp feels.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Dry shampoos, good or bad for the scalp?
Oh, dry shampoos. So, I mean, I use a dry shampoo, and what if any of my staff is watching, they're going to be like, oh, but especially the Trichologist stuff. Sometimes I can't help it. I have an oily scalp. So and I have like a crazy life, 2 kids, like there are days where I just need to quickly, leave the house and put some dry shampoo in. So I'm not a dry shampoo hater. But dry shampoos also have gotten bad rap recently, right? There's a lot of companies that there's ingredients in there that are very harmful, and I'm glad they're recognizing that and pulling some of those off the shelves. So the company that we work with, I know they've just reformulated their dry shampoo to be a little bit more natural, which is great. And so dry shampoos are okay, but again, don't keep them in your scalp for too long. Think of it as a cosmetic product. Think of it like a makeup for the hair. So if we're going to put a makeup on our skin, wash it off, right? So don't leave it in the scalp for too long. Wash that dry shampoo out as soon as you get the chance.
Yeah, that's awesome. And your answer to, like, if you have more oily scalp or hair during big hormonal changes, is other than using a shampoo that's a little bit more astringent, I don't know if that's the right word, to help, remove that excess oil. Would that be your recommendation?
Yes, but also, so hormonal changes are specific because let's say a woman is now going through menopause. So what's happening in a menopause? As we've already said, female hormones sort of decrease, making us more sensitive to male androgens. And androgens, those male androgens tend to affect the hair here and here. So it's not just about using or washing more frequently. Now you need to change the ingredients that you're using, right? So let's talk about, again, skincare. Going from what you're using in your teens and your 20s to your 40s and your 50s is probably going to be different. You're probably going to need to use serums like maybe retinols or ingredients that have more of a keratolytic effect to remove dead skin cells and address fine lines and wrinkles in your 40s and 50s, not in your 20s. Going through hormonal changes with your hair is very much the same, because at this stage, you may need to use topicals that have ingredients that protect the hair from those androgens. So DHT inhibitors, you may need to use ingredients that are creating longer hair growth cycles, like plant stem cells. So it's not just about cleansing, it's about using ingredients that are for that specific stage in your life.
Yeah. Wow. You are just like a wealth of information. I know that, there's so many questions that people have that
we can go all day, but I can't. I would love to.
I know. So if you guys still have questions and concerns, you have hair loss, thinning, inquiries about your scalp, is a Zoom session something that you offer, a virtual session at all, Caroline?
I do virtual trainings and things like that. If there's enough interest, I'm open to it. Like, that's something, I definitely can do. We can have a Zoom seminar where, it's a little bit more interactive. People can ask questions. We can have sort of a roundtable. I'm happy to do that. Like I said, my goal is education. I want to get the message out there. I want to make it clear. I'd like people to come in here saying, oh, I heard about what you've said. And I'm going, yes, okay. The wave of good information is gotten to you. So I can we can arrange that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll let people contact you maybe through a DM. So either at Truly, I think it's Truly You Hair is your Instagram. One of those Instagram tags?
Or we can even, I don't mind, to be honest, to give out my email because it goes into one sort of area, but and so it's Caroline at trulyyou.ca. So that for the people that are watching now, because we don't have, hundreds of thousands of people, I can say you can email me, Caroline at trulyyou.ca, but you can also DM me. And if there's enough interest from your end and mine, we can set a date and do something for sure.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. Well, I am so thankful for your time, your knowledge. It was amazing to speak with you. And again, this is a topic, we could probably go on another few more hours, but you have work to do and clients to see. And I'm so appreciative. Thank you for your time. It was really informative, and I feel a lot more confident as a stylist, going back to work in the salon to be able to, or, just kind of cleared up a few questions that I had, suspicions. I thought this was the answer. I'm glad that, that it was. So,
I'm so happy.
Thank you again.
My pleasure. I'm so happy. Thank you.
Good. And I'll try my best to, you know, to save this on
Yes.
Instagram. If I can turn this into a decent YouTube video, I'll do it. I don't know if our settings are right, but I'll try. But at least it'll be available for replay forever and a day. And yeah, it was just a great morning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
You too. Thanks.